Iron Curtain was a wall that was created to separate Germany's eastern side and western side during the Cold War, which Germany was the focal point of the war. After World War II, Germany fell into the power of the four allies: United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Each got a portion of Germany. Berlin was also divided into four sectors for each of the allies. 40% of Germany was now the Soviet Union, 30% of Germany was now American, 20% of Germany was now British, and 10% of Germany was now French. On March 5, 1946, Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, made a speech which was later called the Iron Curtain speech in the United States. The speech set the tone for the Cold War. Some saw his speech unnecessary, while others believed it was another example of how well Churchill was able to grasp an international situation. His speech marked the onset of the Cold War. In 1948, United States, Great Britain, and French zones combined and created a democratic government, and Soviet Union stayed alone and expanded its influence on Eastern Germany and Europe of communism. Western Germany became Federal Republic of Germany, and East Germany became German Democratic Republic. On June 18, 1848, a quarrel over German currency increased tensions even further. The Western powers issued new currency in the western zones of Germany, but the Soviet Union was unhappy and did not want to use the new currency. Due to this tension of currency, the Soviets halted all shipments of supplies and food through East Germany into West Berlin. The 2.3 million Berliners living in the western sectors of the city, as well as the military personnel stationed there, were marooned with Soviet-controlled territory. A total blockade was in place. The Soviets hoped the blockade would force the Western powers to leave Berlin. Rather than abandoning the city, they sent the British Royal Air Force and the U.S. Air Force necessities of life into West Berlin. The airlift began on June 26, 1948, and the military authority calculated that approximately 4,500 tons of food, coal, and other supplies would be needed daily to keep Western Berliners alive if the blockade carried on into the winter. By spring 1949, the Soviets had lost hope that the airlift would fail and West Germany's economy would begin to grow.
In 1955, West Germany became a completely independent nation, and East Germany became independent of the Soviet Union, but the Western powers refused to call East Germany an independent nation. Throughout the 1950s, roughly 3 million East Germans left home for the freedom and better economic climate of West Germany. A flood of East Germans departed daily for the West through West Berlin. From January to July of 1961, approximately 200,000 East Germans abandoned most of their belongings and headed to the western sectors of Berlin. East Germany's economy could not afford a population drain of this size. On Sunday, August 13, 1961, East German crews began to build a fence of barbed wire connected to concrete posts. This was the beginning of the Iron Curtain. It ran through the heart of Berlin and stretched for 1,393 kilometers. At the dawn of Sunday, crowds of West Berliners came in amazement to view what was happening to the city. A few days later, after the wall went up, crews began construction on the fence. They created a steel-reinforced concrete wall that was topped with barbed wire. Families whose members lived in various sectors of the city suddenly found themselves permanently split apart. A few East Germans made desperate, last-minute attempts to escape. Some tried to jump from windows of apartments that were right on the boundary. Others tried to drive cars through the wire fence. In 1962, 18-year-old Peter Fetcher, an East Berlin citizen, tried to climb over the wall. He was shot by a machine gun carried by an East German guard and bled to death in plain sight of Western police and reporters. A few years later, the wall was topped with round piping that made escape over the wall impossible. Over time, the area around the concrete wall became a deadly no-man's land full of guards, towers, barbed wire, landmines, and a patrol track. In addition, public transportation in East Germany did not go past the border. East Germans had to have special permission to cross the border. West Berliners had specific crossing points that allowed them into East Berlin. The Berlin Wall was an ugly, physical reminder that communism did not work. In addition, it was a huge defeat to communism. In West Berlin, the Berlin Wall was called the Wall of Shame. And around the world, the Berlin Wall was simply called the Wall. No one wanted the Berlin Wall, but some believed that perhaps a wall was better than war. The wall stood for 28 years. The border between East Berlin and West Berlin reopened on November 9, 1989. A celebration went through the streets of Berlin. The fall of the wall also represented the end of the Cold War. The wall was a symbol for the Cold War and the differences in life on either side. When the wall went up, East Berlin improved under the communist system. They had great employment and plenty of food. Behind the wall, East Germans had to follow strict laws and lacked freedom of speech. They also lacked the ability to vote. East Germans were also not allowed to leave and go to West Berlin unless with special permission, which was rare. Although the communist system improved, most citizens were unhappy. The fall of communism occurred when East Germany's economy collapsed and many citizens fled to West Germany after the wall was down. Protests occurred throughout East German cities. A new non-communist government took reign on December 5, 1989, and new elections would be held in 1990. By the summer of 1990, all communist regimes of East Europe were replaced by democratic governments.